Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. How have you been today?
Oh, I've been okay. How have you been?
It's been going all right, I would say. Producer Doug hasn't yelled at us lately, except that recently because of the reference to lore.
Oh, you can't say that word. The word's banned.
Oh, no. Did he put up a sign on the bulletin board of the break
room?
room?
He just frowns at me. If we ever say that word, he walks past me and he just gives me the biggest frown.
Isn't our producer always frowning?
No, sometimes he's smoking a cigar.
Anyway, beyond the talking to that we got from our producer, Zach, what have you been up to? What have you been playing?
Recently, I've been playing Wolfenstein 3D, which was originally released way back in 1992 by id Software, and it's the game where you play as an American spy who's captured by the Nazis and thrown into Castle Wolfenstein. You then break your way out of Castle Wolfenstein, killing every Nazi in your path, and you go to the next castle and do it again. You just keep doing it until you kill Hitler. It's a great first-person shooter. It's a fun game. I've had a copy on Steam for ages. It's the DOS version that they just rebundled with DOSBox, but I'm trying to play it through EC Wolf, which is a popular source port, and it makes the game a lot smoother. It allows for higher resolutions, and it also allows for different mapping for more modernized controls if you want to play with like mouse and keyboard, or if you want to play with like proper strafing and stuff. So it does make playing Wolfenstein a bit more modernized, which is nice. Wolfenstein is a great game, but it is a very dated game in terms of its controls. It uses tank controls in the sense that you don't really strafe. You just kind of go straight,
Pivot,
and then you pivot.
But
the addition of some updated controls allows the game to play a bit more familiar to maybe playing something like Duke Nukem or Doom, just without the fidelity of those games. It's still the Wolfenstein engine. It's just the Wolfenstein engine spruced up a little bit. But I've been enjoying it. It's Wolfenstein 3D. What's there to say?
It's funny. Both of our games were released in '92 that we've recently been playing, and also both have involved Nazis.
Wow.
Because I've been playing Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, which was developed and published by LucasArts, who's going to come back in this episode, and was released in 1992 for the Amiga, DOS, and the Macintosh. I've been playing the CD DOS version, which was released a little bit after the original version, that has full voice acting and digitized sound effects. You play as Indiana Jones, and it starts off with him exploring the archives of his college, which is pretty crazy the way that they lay it out, because you're going through a number of levels that seem like you're in a temple or something like that, and there's like Egyptian statues and stuff, and things fall on you and you fall through holes, and it's very unsafe. And then you realize he's in a college, and then I'm just like thinking that there's a lot of work safe violations going on here. But you're like looking for a statue that you eventually find. Then you bring the statue out to your friend, and there's some other guy there, and that other guy ends up being a Nazi and steals the statue from you, and you have to end up going after him and teaming up with some other people and eventually ending up in Atlantis. I haven't played very far in the game, so I'm not really sure how Atlantis comes into play, but because it's in the title of the game, I assume that there's some variety of Atlantean mystery going on. So I'm excited to play through it. I'm playing it through the Scum engine, or Scum VM, which is a emulation program that allows you to emulate old adventure games and other games. Apparently you can emulate very different games through the Scum VM engine, because you could emulate like Myst 3 Exile through it. Some really odd stuff that could be emulated through it. So I am playing Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis on my RG405, which is a smaller handheld, but it's cool that I can play Scum games on it, which means that I could play Indiana Jones, the Fate of Atlantis on an airplane, or I can play Journeyman on an airplane, which makes my life that much easier.
The reason you could play Myst 3 Exile is because Residual VM Presto was merged into Scum VM,
which came with Journeyman. Journeyman was the Visual Presto engine.
So when Scum VM merged with Presto engine VM developers, they allowed for access to all these other games.
It's wild, because then there's Exoscum VM, which is all of the things that are on it, which is what I have on my RG405. So on a 1 terabyte SD card, the same card that you could use for an old digital camera, I have 200 gigs of old It's either Scum or Presto video games.
I need to get the Exo Scum download because I have Exo Dream and I have Exo DOS and Exo Win.
What's Exo Dream?
Exo Dream is all the LucasArts stuff. So it's like the early Star Wars titles, Dark Forces, Jedi Knight, X-Wing, Grim Fandango, Maniac Mansion, Monkey Island, the Desktop Adventures, if you want to play Yoda stories.
Well, so what's interesting is I actually don't have Exo Scum on my computer. I have it on a SD drive because I downloaded it directly to the SD drive so that I didn't take up the 200 gigs of space. And then I had to unpack all those zip files. So now it's taking up 400 gigs of space, which arguably I guess I could delete the zip files, but I might want to bring them to my main computer eventually. So I'm just leaving them on there as a holding pattern until I can clean up some space around my desktop, as it were.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, it's perfect that you were playing a LucasArts game because we are, in fact, diving into a specific LucasArts series. We're going to be talking today about the Jedi Knight saga, a series of 5 games that were made, starting in the early 90s and ending in the early 2000s. The Jedi Knight games are games that Seth and I are very familiar with, and people who've listened to our podcast should also be kind of familiar with them. We've talked about the Jedi Knight games before. They've been our recently plays. I think I was recently playing Jedi Outcast many moons ago, and when the Dark Forces remake came out, Seth and I were both playing that. I think at one point, one of them might have even been a retro rewind. They are games that we play a lot. They're games that we like, and we have a long history of playing the Dark Forces games and the Jedi Knight games. Seth, do you have any memories in particular of the Jedi Knight games?
I definitely recall with the original Dark Forces game was one of my first interactions with an FPS game that wasn't Doom, and you could look up, you could jump, and it was really exciting. And I think I mentioned that in our Star Wars episode because we did do an episode on Star Wars back episode 5. In that episode, I think I talked about how it was very novel when I interacted with Dark Forces that first time. I played a lot of Jedi Knight to Jedi Outcast, and then I played a lot of Jedi Knight to Jedi Academy. Their naming nomenclature is weird, which are technically part of the Dark Forces series. With Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast 2.
Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast.
Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast. With playing that, you play as Kyle Katarn, and I think we're going to talk about the game later, but that game is amazing.
Oh, I love that game.
I really like the ramp for that game because you start off playing like a first-person shooter, then you come Jedi, and the game becomes very crazy as you gain the ability to get force powers and use them in a first-person shooter, and it's great. One of my probably all-time favorite first-person shooter games. Played a lot of it. Played a lot of Jedi Academy as well, and yeah, it was a really fun game. I should really get around to playing it. They redid Dark Forces. They remastered Dark Forces, which I picked up and been playing through. So hopefully Night Dive will remaster the rest of the Jedi Knight series.
That'd be amazing.
And that would make me very happy. But yeah, Zach, what about you? Did you talk about your memories already?
No, I haven't. In terms of my memories, I mostly played Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy. I played a lot of those games. I put a lot of hours into those games. There was a period of time when I was over, I think I was spending a summer with our dad, and that's like the only video game that he had on his computer for a bit. So that was like one of the only games I was playing. But Jedi Academy was one of the first online games that I played, like properly online. Like I remember going onto servers and going into these small little death matches with people and like chatting with people through the text chat and stuff like that, and it was fun. I would try to find smaller servers with not a lot of people because I was kind of anxious about going online as a child, but I would play Jedi Academy and usually through deathmatch, and I did a lot of playing the game different ways. So one of the things I love about the Jedi Academy and Jedi Outcast is that the cheats for the games can be really fun. One cheat in particular is called realistic saber combat, and it just allows dismemberment of the enemies.
That's a really good cheat.
So you can just like pop the head off of stormtroopers, and you can set it different levels. So it can be like level 1, which is like, their arm might pop off more frequently. Or you could set it to like level 10, where it's like, if you just tap them with your lightsaber, they just crumble apart into like a pile.
I really like the Cloud City level. I think is one of the best levels for that.
Oh, yeah.
The Cloud City level, you come up and you're like on the elevator or something, and there's just a pile of stormtroopers, and then you like engage your force speed, because by that time you have like force speed 3 or whatever, where you move normal speed and everybody moves really slow. And you use the dismember cheat and you just plow through like 30 stormtroopers, and then as soon as the speed ends, it all resumes to normal speed and they all just explode.
It's like
it's
crumble,
just like chaos. It's great. Also, the one thing that sticks with me through my memories is Kyle Katarn's scream when he dies. It's just haunting.
So getting a bit into the history of these games, as Seth alluded to, we've talked about Star Wars before. We talked about it back in episode 5. We also talked about LucasArts and its history a bit when we talked about The Secret of Monkey Island back in episode 126. To refresh everyone, LucasArts was founded in 1982, primarily due to the split of the Lucasfilm Computer Division, which George Lucas had created in 1979 to explore the world of computer graphics and the brand new market of video games. One portion of the division continued work on video games, and the other portion would go on to focus on graphics. That portion became Pixar. In their early days, LucasArts, known at the time as Lucasfilm Games Group, worked primarily with Atari, working on games like Ball Blazer and Rescue on Fractalus, which were later published in 1985 by Epix. They would also put out the adventure game Maniac Mansion, and also an early online role-playing game called Habitat. In 1990, the company reorged and became LucasArts Entertainment Company, with Industrial Light and Magic and Skywalker Sound folded into it, though these two divisions would later be consolidated separately as Lucas Digital, and LucasArts became its own company essentially as the game division for Lucasfilms. In 1993, LucasArts hired on Darren Stinnett, who was tasked with being the project lead for a new 3D Star Wars game. Stinnett first imagined a game as a flight simulator, something where you're flying around different Star Wars vehicles. But then a little game called Wolfenstein 3D caught his eye, and he noticed that Wolfenstein 3D was doing very well. So he thought it might be more worthwhile to begin development of a first-person shooter. By August of 1993, Darren's team had begun work on the Jedi Engine, a 3D game engine that was originally built in assembly language, but later moved to C when the 486 and Pentium processors became more standardized and more popular. The Jedi Engine is rather different than similar engines such as the Doom or Build Engine. For one thing, you can actually have multiple levels in the Jedi Engine, as in you can have multiple stacked levels. So in the Doom engine and in the Build Engine, you can't really put a floor on top of another floor. You have to fake it. The Jedi Engine actually allows you to stack areas, which is unique. You could also look up and down, something that the Doom engine didn't really allow. The engine also used various programming tricks to give the illusion of 3D while also keeping fluidity and fidelity. The original plan for the game that they were working on was going to be a recreation of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, and you would play as Luke Skywalker. However, the team felt this was a bit too limiting, so they opted to create an original character who would go on his own adventures, and this character is Kyle Katarn, and the game would become Dark Forces. In December, Justin Chin was brought onto the Dark Forces team and began to pitch the idea that Kyle could potentially go against a special force of stormtroopers, an idea which would evolve into the Dark Troopers that appear in the final game. Chin would help put together the early design documents, laying out the 32 missions, which were reduced to 14 missions, the different objectives, and the different planets. Chin would also provide concept artwork to the level designers, who would build the game out in AutoCAD.
I was just thinking about how, we're talking about how the Dark Forces has like somewhat fake 3D environment. And then whenever just when you said that, I just think about Moff Rebus.
Oh yeah,
and how he's very 2D. Moff Rebus, for those who are listening, is a moth that Kyle Katarn is on a mission to eventually. He kidnaps to get some plans from him. And Moff Rebus is he sits in a chair and he wears a wife beater and he holds a pistol and he has these fun sunglasses. Anyway, to get back to the history of the game, textures and surfaces would be done by 5 different individuals on the team who were tasked with making sure the game kept a Star Wars theme while also dealing with the limitations they had to face. Now, as the game neared completion, different changes were made as the team felt more capable and confident of the project they were working on. This included creating a new engine just for cutscenes, adding in the character of Jan Ors, putting in restart points if a character dies, and adding extra lives as pickup. Playtesters would also be tasked with arranging where the pickups would be and the placement of enemies to make the game challenging. Some other changes that were made was to Kyle Katarn's ship, the Moldy Crow, which was originally going to appear as a two-dimensional bitmap sprite but was replaced with a 3D model. Certain locations were also changed, such as the first level originally being set on an Imperial Star Destroyer. I didn't know his ship was called the Moldy Crow.
His first ship is called the Moldy Crow. The second ship is the Raven's Claw, I think.
That one, that's the ship that I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Raven's Crest or
Raven's
whatever.
Claw.
Raven's Claw, yeah.
Yeah, the
And
Moldy
then,
Crow is the first one.
And then they fly around on the casino ship with Lando.
Oh, Lady Luck.
Now, sound effects in the game were easy to source because it was LucasArts, and the team had access to the library of Skywalker sound. So if they wanted to make Star Wars sounds, they could just go to the library of Star Wars sounds and play them. A voice cast was also hired on to provide the voices of the different characters. The music in the game, of course, is based on the work of John Williams, though original music was also created to match the tone and motif of Williams' famous pieces, but not composed by Williams himself.
Like, for example, Kyle's theme isn't particularly a Williams piece, but it's inspired by Williams.
Yeah, it's an inspired and possibly elements of a Williams piece has been taken and rearranged. And now, Dark Forces was released in March of 1995, very much in the wake of the release of Doom and Doom 2, which was released in 93 and 94 respectively. At first, the game was often compared to Doom, even be called a clone by some, but as mentioned earlier, the Jedi engine was unique from the Doom engine and was even more capable in some places. The plot of Dark Forces follows Kyle Katarn, a mercenary who typically runs jobs for the Rebel Alliance. Kyle has a rocky relationship with the Rebel Alliance, as for many years he believed they murdered his parents. He joined the Imperial Academy to seek revenge against the Rebel Alliance. But he soon meets Jan Ors, who's a double agent, and he learns the truth of what happened. His parents were killed by the Empire, and the rebels were blamed because the Empires are a bunch of weenies like that. Now, Kyle defected from the Empire and saved Jan after she was arrested by the Empire when it was discovered that she was selling information to the rebels. The two became mercenaries and took on various jobs, but primarily worked with the rebels. The first mission in the game is to recover the plans for the Death Star, because this took place before Rogue One. And obviously before the Disney merger. So this is the Legends explanation of where the Death Stars for the original Death Star were recovered. Later, you are tasked with researching the Dark Trooper Project, an Imperial plan to develop new soldiers. The work on the Dark Trooper Project is being conducted by General Ram Mak, and your overall goal is to stop Mak and is to destroy the Dark Trooper Project. Along the way, you meet Crix Badine, Jabba the Hutt, and Boba Fett, because it's not a Legends game unless Boba Fett shows up. Now, the game sold well, with an estimated 952,000 units being sold between 93 and 99, and being considered the 10th best-selling computer game during this period, being beaten out by SimCity 2000 and Doom. The game did feature some criticisms from audiences, specifically because the game lacked two things: multiplayer and being able to use a lightsaber, which is kind of a thing that you want to play Star Wars games for.
And thankfully, a sequel was in the works that would fix these issues. Led by Justin Chin, the sequel looked to not only fix the criticism of having no lightsabers and no multiplayer, but it also brought the game into proper 3D. A new engine was being developed, the Sith engine, which supported full 3D acceleration thanks to Direct3D 5.0. The game also was going to do something else unique, which was to bring in FMV sequences to tell the story. That's right, live action sequences in the Star Wars first-person shooter were filmed, and they actually included the first lightsaber footage filmed since Return of the Jedi in 1983. Footage was filmed for different storyline paths as well, depending on the actions the character takes in the game, because there's actually a kind of a branching storyline. The story itself takes place just after Return of the Jedi, when the Dark Jedi Jarek begins to search for the Valley of the Jedi. How many times can I say Jedi in one sentence? Kyle, who's still working as a mercenary, discovers a disc that contains information about the Valley of the Jedi from a droid broker named AT-88. After obtaining the disc, Kyle encounters the Force ghost of Jedi Master Q-Ran, who was killed by Jarek, and Q-Ran begins to teach Kyle the ways of the Jedi and also give Kyle his old lightsaber. The story of Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight primarily revolves around trying to stop Jarek and his Dark Jedi acolytes. The game also, again, as mentioned, features different paths, a dark side and a light side. If you follow the dark side, different events will play out, such as Jan dying and Kyle executing Jarek and becoming the new Emperor. If you follow the light side, Jan will survive and Kyle and Jan will escape before Jarek's ship crashes into the planet, killing him. So Jarek still dies, just the way he dies.
The light side, dark side paths is unique to Dark Forces 2. It's
Yes.
not in Dark Forces 1.
It's not in Jedi Outcast either, but it comes back in Jedi Academy.
Yeah, because in the original Dark Forces, you just played through each of the missions and then you beat the game.
Yeah, because Kyle's not a light side or dark side guy. He's just a man with a gun.
But also, like, it's not like necessarily a structured story. It's a little more mission.
Like I think the primary story of Dark Forces 1 is centered on Rom and his Dark Troopers, but there's like other things going on. Like that's just like the overarching thing. Jedi Knight is definitely just like Jarek is the villain, and that's like who the focus is. Now, along with the new Jedi tricks that Kyle begins to learn and the introduction of the lightsaber, the game also introduced multiplayer, allowing for 32 players online. You could also do LAN. Players could create an avatar, edit their own skin and lightsaber color, and play games like Capture the Flag and Jedi Training. Jedi Training is basically just deathmatch, which I hope that's what real Jedi Training was like. They just put everyone in a ring and they're like, all right, kill each other. Now, Jedi Knight was released in October of 1997, and the very next year it got an expansion pack, Mysteries of the Sith. Mysteries of the Sith, while still using the Sith engine, improved upon elements from Jedi Knight, such as updating the lighting, improved the artificial intelligence, and also allowing for interactions between NPCs. The game did not feature new FMV sequences. Instead, it opted to use 3D rendered cutscenes using the game's engine. Mysteries of the Sith is inspired by the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn, with Mara Jade being a playable character in the game. The story is set 5 years after Jedi Knight and is based on the light side ending, where Kyle is now a Jedi Master and has Mara Jade as an apprentice. You have to discover information about a Sith temple and deal with the Imperial Remnant. Toward the end of the game, Kyle becomes seduced by the dark side, and him and Mara Jade have a duel, and Kyle then sees the error of his ways, and Mara Jade's like, it's okay, but Kyle's like, I no longer want to be a Jedi, and he renounces the Force, and he goes back to being a mercenary.
Yeah, and in this game, he gives up his Jedi powers.
Yes, yeah, he renounces the Force, but not in like I'm renouncing my religion. He's like, I am giving up my powers.
Yeah, at the end of this game, he is no longer a Jedi.
Right.
And he gets it back in a funny way.
Yeah.
Now, Mysteries of the Sith also added in 15 multiplayer maps, with some being based on the Lars homestead from The New Hope, Bespin from Empire Strikes Back, and the Emperor's Throne Room from Return of the Jedi. Both Jedi Knight and Mystery of the Sith did well, with Jedi Knight selling over 247,036 units in the US alone through its lifetime. Both titles received strong reviews, with All Game giving both titles 4.5 out of 5 stars, Next Generation giving 4 out of 5 stars, and PC Zone giving them a 95%. With great success comes great sequels, because next up was Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast, and instead of being handled by LucasArts directly, this game was developed by Raven Software. Is this when a ship gets renamed?
Yes, to the Raven's Claw.
Wow. Interesting. Instead of the moldy, what was it?
Moldy Crow, which I can see why Raven Software didn't want that.
Do you think it was part of their deal with making this game?
I really hope so.
That they had to rename the ship from Moldy Crow to the Raven Claw?
I really hope
so.
so.
And LucasArts was like, we don't care what Kyle Katarn's ship is called.
What's funny is they're very similar looking ships. Like, they're not identical. They're obviously different. They're different types of ships.
Did the other ship explode?
The Moldy Crow gets destroyed at the end of Jedi Knight. It's destroyed during the battle with Jarek.
Yes, and then he gets another ship.
Yes.
Gotcha. Now, Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast was announced at E3 in 2001, with some of the locations being teased, like Cloud City and Yavin 4. During the demonstration for the game, LucasArts showed off the lightsaber combat, which was updated from Jedi Knight, and a new system where NPCs would fight alongside you. I recall the game, they don't do so very well.
They don't do so very well, or very often. Like, there's only a few missions where, like, Jan is with you, or, like, Luke shows up for 1 minute in a mission, like, at the very beginning, and then he disappears. hilarious.
They really just get in the way. The lightsaber combat took some inspiration from Bushido Blade, which is a game that we also should talk about eventually, where you have to wait and then strike at the right moment. Unlike Dark Forces and Jedi Knight, the third sequel was not going to be developed in another new original engine. Instead, Raven Software utilizes the Quake 3 Arena engine, though with some modifications, such as an increased polygon count. The game would also be shown off at QuakeCon 2001. A website for the game, now under the name Jedi Outcast, was launched in 2002, which featured information about the characters, weapons, force abilities, and screenshots and concept art were posted. The plot of the game takes place 2 years after Mysteries of the Sith. Kyle and Jan are back as mercenaries, primarily serving the New Republic on various jobs. They're sent to Kajim as there are reports of Imperial forces occupying an old base. When they get there, they discover the Imperial Remnant has been studying crystals similar to Kyber crystals, the gems that power lightsabers. They're sent to Arcturus Prime, a mining colony, and discover that the Imperial Remnant has also taken up a base there, while they encounter the Dark Jedi Dasan, who is a man that has a T-Rex head. And then Jan is allegedly killed by Dasan. Kyle becomes very angry and does one of his well-known screams.
Don't you touch her.
On second thought, Tavion, kill her.
Kyle! Dad!
And he goes to the Valley of the Jedi to regain his force abilities that he abandoned after the incident with Mara Jade by stepping into some pillars of light and floating, being imbued with the force.
So he shows up at the Valley of the Jedi, right? And his old master's there, and he's like, "Don't do it, Kyle. It's not good for you." And Kyle's like, whatever. He's like,
and there's no detriment to him.
well, there is a detriment in that Dasan followed him, and that leads to the reborn.
Sure.
But still, like, there's no effect on Kyle's life.
Yeah, it doesn't give him cancer or anything.
No.
He then retrieves his lightsaber wherever he stashed it, talks to Luke, and then you begin your adventure with force powers. Because in this canon, Luke is running a Jedi training school and not attempting to kill his nephew. You then later encounter Lando, who is amazing, as always, and you run into some acolytes of Dasan called the Reborn, which Zach mentioned happened because Dasan follows you secretly to the Valley of the Jedi and makes a bunch of Reborns by stepping them onto the Jedi magic lights. Which, I mean, the place is called Valley of the Jedi, so I'm just confused why Dasan couldn't find it without Kyle Katarn. Like, could you just look that up in a library? And Dasan starts creating this army of these guys that are Reborns, and they all kind of look like vagabonds.
Yeah, they were all like wearing hoods, but they're not wearing like robes. They're just wearing like outfits that have hoods.
They're wearing hoods with like spandex.
Yeah.
And they have different colored hoods depending on how powerful they are. Dasan also ends up working with an Imperial Moff, a former Imperial Moff by the name of Gallic Fayar, who's creating reborn stormtroopers called Shadow Troopers, which have special armor that can deflect lightsabers because it's made of cortosis, and it's great.
You want to know what's really great about Jedi Outcast is the cast of Jedi Outcast. So, just a fun fact about the cast of the game is that a lot of the voice actors are familiar in the voice acting scene. You know, you have Charles Martinet appearing as a Bespin cop and a couple background characters. Kevin Michael Richardson plays Relo Baruch. Kath Soucie plays Tavion. Jeff Bennett plays Kyle Katarn. But most importantly, the only returning cast member from the Star Wars original series, Billy D. Williams, appears as Lando Calrissian. And I just love that, like, Mark Hamill didn't show up as Luke Skywalker, but Billy D. Williams did as Lando Calrissian. And that's how you know Lando's the best character in a Star Wars game.
Or that Billy's usually looking for work. Spoiler, I don't think we actually mention it in the episode, but Jan is not dead.
No, she survives.
Jan survives, and they live happily ever after Kyle Katarn smokes Dasan and Tavion, who's Dasan's lady.
Yeah, like weird spandex wearing lady.
And then I think they kiss.
Yeah, Jan and Kyle kiss.
So then they really, truly live happily ever after. And I'm pretty sure he lives on with his Jedi powers. Kyle Katarn does not follow the Jedi code, though. That should be clear.
He doesn't even wear robes.
He is a Jedi in powers only. He does not follow the Jedi code. He somehow has a connection to the Force, and he uses it to blast people and truly abuses it, but can still be light side, but doesn't follow a code. so he can have his lady friend hang out with him. Now, Jedi Outcast would go on to release March 28th, 2002, and I actually bought it in 2002. And the software development kit, the SDK, was released in April of the same year, featuring a level editor, a map compiler, a model viewer, and a shader editor. And the game was released on PC, GameCube, and Xbox. Upon release, the game sold 390,000 units to the US and earned about $17 million, or about $24.7 million today, by August of 2006. Game Informer gave the PC version 9.5 out of 10. All Game gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and GameSpot gave it a 9 out of 10. LucasArts would approach Raven Software after the release of Jedi Outcast and say, "That's great, let's make another." And they would begin work on a sequel, which they would give Raven Software 1 year for development. They said, just make a game again with the same stuff, but make it different. And the next game, Jedi Academy, would go on to utilize the same Quake 3 Team Arena engine and consisted of people who both worked on Jedi Outcast and now also people who worked on Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, because that game was also made by Raven Software.
And it's also on the Quake 3 Team Arena engine.
These guys were just cranking out bangers.
Now, one of the early plans for the sequel, Jedi Academy, was to not have Kyle Katarn as the main character, which arguably makes it the worst in the franchise, but it's still a good game. They knew that Kyle would already basically be a Jedi Master at this point in the storyline, and they wanted players to be able to start off fresh and not be like overpowered monsters on the first level. So it was decided to create an original player character who they named Jaden Core, who can be designed by the player. Players would get to decide both Jaden's gender and species. You could play as a human, a Keldor, who are the people that look like Plo Koon, a Twi'lek, which are the people with the long...
Leku?
Yeah, Leku, like Bib Fortuna is a Twi'lek. You can play as a Rodian, who looks like Greedo, and you can play as a Zabrak, which are like Darth Maul people. Another addition was the ability to choose your force specialization. You could either learn primarily dark side abilities or primarily light side abilities, or you could do a happy mix. You really have the choice. And what's fun is, depending on what you choose, your characters will berate you during loading screens. So if you pick a lot of dark side abilities, Kyle will just randomly be like, "Hey Jaden, I just want you to know, the dark side might be tempting, but it's not worth it." But if you pick like only light side stuff, they'll be like, "We're really proud of you, buddy." And I'm like, come on, let me have fun. Raven Software also wanted to include locations familiar to fans of the movies. So you get to visit the abandoned Echo base on Hoth, or you even get to travel to Mos Eisley on Tatooine. According to Justin Agree, one of the lead designers, Hoth was the most challenging mission to design, and they had to refer to source material from Empire Strikes Back to ensure that it was most accurate. Another change from the previous games was a mission format, with players able to choose which missions they wanted to do first. Rather than going, one mission at a time, you get an option to choose a selection of missions. And you can even skip missions if you don't want to do one. Raven wanted to do this to avoid players feeling like the game was too linear and to give players a bit more freedom. They also bundled modding tools with the release of the game, but they did not provide customer support for the modding tools because they didn't want to receive phone calls. That's like the reasoning that I read, is that Raven Software was like, "We don't mind taking phone calls about people having problems with their game, but if you don't know how to mod, don't call us." Lightsaber combat would be updated as well, with players now having the ability to either dual-wield lightsabers or use a double-bladed lightsaber, a la Darth Maul. The game's plot takes place 2 years after the events of Jedi Outcast. Kyle Katarn, now a Jedi Master and a teacher at the Jedi Academy on Yavin 4, where he teaches with Luke Skywalker. While en route to the planet, a shuttle containing the next batch of Padawans is shot down and crashed into a forest. 2 Padawans, Jaden Core and Rosh Pennon, who's very annoying, land, and they are separated from the other group on the ship. So they have to make their way to the temple on foot. When they arrive, they are confronted by Tavion, dun dun dun, who has survived from Jedi Outcast. She was the former apprentice of Dasan, and she knocks out Jaden and runs away. You then go on a bunch of missions, you train your force powers, and you soon learn that Tavion is leading a group called the Disciples of Ragnos, a cult that worships the ancient Sith Lord Marco Ragnos. Tavion and her cult are trying to resurrect Marco Ragnos, because why not? You have to go and stop her, or you could take the power for yourself. That's right, this game has 2 options. light or dark side. If you stay on the light side, you defeat Tavion, and you defeat Marco Ragnos, and you save the day. If you go to the dark side, you kill Rosh Pennon, you defeat Tavion, you fight Kyle Katarn, you don't kill him, and then you steal a Star Destroyer, and it's objectively the better ending. Jedi Academy would be released in September of 2003, and it received some pretty good reception. GameSpot gave the game an 8.4 out of 10, Game Informer gave the game an 8.5 out of 10, and IGN gave the game a 8.8 out of 10. Critics were quick to point out that it was really cool to be able to use the lightsaber from the beginning of the game, and the customization of the character was also very neat. The AI, however, was criticized as being kind of stupid. Primarily, people were noticing that enemy AI and even some of the like buddy AIs that would team up with you would just kind of stand in the middle of fire and die.
While Jedi Knight games are no longer canon thanks to Disney decanonizing the expanded universe and they're now all considered legends, some elements of the game can still be found referenced in modern Star Wars. The plot of stealing the Death Star plans is used again in Rogue One. The Dark Trooper program is a central part of The Mandalorian. Kurtosis, the substance used in Jedi Outcast for the Shadow Troopers, is featured in The Acolyte. While Kyle himself isn't canon, his outfit is canon and appears as an outfit in Jedi Survivor. His ship, the Moldy Crow, is also canon as included in the 2019 board game Star Wars Outer Rim. Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy have also been huge in the modding scenes, with various mods released since the release of the game. Some mods, such as movie battles, adds in other characters from the Star Wars universe. Another, which was last updated in 2008, modded Jedi Academy to recreate a few levels from Dark Forces. There is also Open Jedi Project, which adds new weapons, force abilities, and new playable characters like Ashoka, Luke, or random people from the Jedi Council. And just earlier this year, Night Dive Studios released Dark Forces Remastered, which gives us hope that they will go and remaster the rest of the series.
One thing that's fun, though, with the legacy of the Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy games is that they are very fun to watch people speedrun. I highly recommend anyone listening to look up Covert Muffin's GDQ runs of Jedi Academy or Jedi Outcast. Covert Muffin is a speedrunner who I've just recently been enjoying watching his videos, so that's why he's on my mind. And he did a few years in a row would do speed runs of Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy, and he has the game down to like a science where he's able to beat Jedi Outcast in like 45 minutes, and he can beat Jedi Academy in like 50, maybe less. And a lot of it is due to just the intricacies of the engine, where he's able to do things like reload his graphics renderer at the right time so that he can enter cutscenes and just skip entire chunks of the level, or like push stormtroopers into doorways to unlock parts of the level you're not supposed to go in. It's very funny to watch him do the speed run. I definitely recommend it. But yeah, that is the Star Wars Dark Forces Jedi Knight games. It's a great series. I wish Kyle Katarn would return. I remember when I saw the trailer for Rogue One and it showed Cassian Andor in the trailer, I was like, oh man, that's going to be Kyle Katarn. And it wasn't. It was a new guy. And I'm fine with Cassian Andor. I love Cassian Andor, but I really wanted that to be Kyle Katarn. Maybe he'll show up in Andor Season 2, just so we have him. Now, getting into our retro rewind, Seth asked me to play Red Storm Rising, released in 1988 by Microprose, and based on the Tom Clancy novel of the same name. You play as a captain of a U.S. nuclear submarine as you hunt down Soviet submarines. It's a pretty comprehensive military simulation. It's also very dated. There are barely any graphics in the game. It's a lot of text, and when you do have graphics, it's pretty much just still images. So arguably, it's not the best for a simulation, because when you play a simulation, you do kind of want to feel like you're in the simulation, and you're not just reading like spreadsheets. It does a good job at least being comprehensive, right? And doing all the things that you'd expect a simulation game of a submarine combat sim to do. However, it is a very dated game. It came out in the 80s, and it was well regarded when it came out, but I just don't think it holds up as well as it could. Do I think Red Storm Rising holds up overall? Not for me. If you really like older sim games, you might enjoy it, but it's just not quite there for me. Next week, Seth, you can play The Hunt for Red October for the Super Nintendo.
Great, thanks. Now, Zach had me play Yogi Bear Cartoon Capers for the Sega Genesis, developed by Cybersoft or Empire Interactive, depending whether it was the North America or EU audience, and released in 1994. I played it on the SNES because apparently apparently I didn't have a copy of the EU version in my collection. That was on the Mega Drive. In the game, you play as Yogi Bear, and you have to get through 5 different levels, all in Jellystone Park, to prevent it from becoming a chemical dumping zone, which apparently in this game, only a bear can do. You play as Yogi, and you have to platform through the first level is like a snow level, and throughout the game, you have to collect clocks, and you have to hit picnic baskets.
I thought you said you have to collect Glocks.
That'd be great if you had to collect clocks. But you have to collect these like time clock, and you have to get 100 of them per level. And you have to get these picnic baskets. Though the picnic baskets only work sometimes when you hit them. The game is a standard platformer with not much going on with it, except if you really like Yogi Bear. I just don't know who really likes Yogi. I mean, I don't have anything against Yogi Bear. I'm just saying, but I'm just curious about the audience of people who are obsessed with Yogi Bear that they want to play a 1994 video game. But it's fine. It's fun. I think it holds up in that same vein that most well-made platforming games hold up from 30 years ago. And so next week, Zach, you can play One Must Fall 2097 for MS-DOS.
All right, I will. Well, thank you everyone for listening to today's episode. If you have any memories of the Jedi Knight games, please email us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found, be it iHeartRadio, Podbean, or iTunes. We're also available on Facebook, Classic Gaming Brothers, Instagram, Classic Gaming Brothers, X, CG Brothers Pod, Blue Sky, CG Brothers Pod, and we're available on Threads as Classic Gaming Brothers. We're also on YouTube now, Classic Gaming Brothers, and you can always visit our website, www.classicgamingbrothers.com. Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
We've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's
That's
right.
right.